We are live. Well, technically not live. We're actually recording this, but we're live for Tim and myself with recording this first episode in a long time. I know we had some plans this offseason to do some episodes. Some live stuff got in the way for me. Nothing bad. All good things, but just has been a busy offseason as far as things that I've been up to, and I'm sure Tim has been busy too. But we are back talking Penn State football as the spring has just wrapped up. Penn State did their allotted 15 practices. Tim was actually at the blue and white game, and we're kind of use this episode to talk about that a little bit, but just overall in general to talk about everything that's been happening with, with Penn State football since basically the Notre Dame game. I think the last time that I came on was the Jim Knowles hire, but really only talked about Jim Knowles. So all the changes that has gone on at Penn State. But before we get to that, we're going to talk about the spring game itself. Tim, before we even talk about the spring game, how have you been? Welcome back to the show.
I got that feeling, Pat, of shaking off the rust. You know, as you said, last time we were together, at least doing the show, it was right after the Notre Dame game, which was, that was only like a month ago, right?
Something like that. A month, maybe 3 months at this point. Yeah.
But I do, before I get into this spring, I do want to apologize to the one or two basketball fans carrying their torches and pitchforks at me, angry that I didn't do any basketball videos this season. Much like the team, I kind of went into quit mode in mid-January. So I'll try and do better next year, folks.
Yeah, that was not ideal. I know you say the one or two people. I don't know who was aching for basketball content, because man, even transfer portal wise, I usually do pretty heavy articles on who's Penn State targeting, who's Mike Red's going after, and it is not great for Penn State basketball. Not even just Mike Rhodes questions of.
I think it has to do with the House settlement in part. From what I've read, they're waiting on the House settlement to be, or the House thing to be settled, and then they're probably because I think right now the amount. I think a lot of these portal guys are asking for a mad amount of money before the House settlement goes into effect. And of course, Penn State, this being Penn State basketball, it's not like they're going to be able to throw as much money as some of the bigger dogs at these guys.
Yeah, which is a little, not surprising, I guess, in the sense, but I do feel like last offseason, Penn State basketball was in a better way of NIL than most people thought.
Very true.
And maybe it was just past season. Some of the donors have dried up, but not Penn State basketball. This is about Penn State football. Tim, you were at the spring game. I don't know what the actual attendance was, but it felt like it was maybe 20,000 people that were there.
I will say, it was a nice enough day. It was sunny, windy. You had some people tailgating, and so it still felt like a blue-white weekend, but definitely compared to prior blue-white weekends, it definitely felt a lot more subdued. I think it goes to just speak for or just the trend of what's happening with spring games across college football. The ones that are still happening, at least, because as you know, Pat, some schools have been just outright canceling the spring games. Nebraska being the most notable of all. Because coaches are
outside the stadium. Did it I can't remember the last Blue White game I attended. I think it was probably 2017. Outside the stadium, it felt like a normal Penn State game for the most part.
For the most part,
feel that way outside the stadium, or was it obviously the attendance inside the stadium wasn't as strong, but was outside still pretty, popping?
Somewhat, maybe on a lesser scale than I think it has in past blue whites. And of course, blue whites usually, it's not a real game. People are more focused on the tailgating aspect of things. And I don't know, the tailgating just seemed maybe it's also the wind, I think maybe some people just closed up shop earlier, but it didn't quite feel like the same level of crowds as you've had for previous blue whites. So it definitely felt a little more subdued overall. There were still people, there was still a crowd, there was still a game, there was still attendance. But definitely felt more subdued from prior blue whites that I've been to.
As far as on the field, who are some players? And granted, I don't take a ton of stock into the blue and white game, even going back to the years where it was more of a. I know now it's definitely more scrimmagey practice than full on game, but even going back to the years where it was an absolute like game, you take things with a grain of salt. I remember like the year that Mac Hippenhammer had 2 touchdowns, and look at what happened with Mac Hippenhammer at Penn State. So you can't take too much from it, but who are some players that stuck out, either starters or backup guys or whoever it may be, guys that kind of jumped off the field to you?
Funny you mentioned backup guys. There's a big backup quarterback battle brewing between Ethan Grunkmeyer and Jackson Smolik. Smolik especially, I was impressed with how mobile he looked and how good of an arm he showed, of accuracy and strength. He definitely looked like someone who has gotten over whatever injuries were hampering him last season. He seems to have gotten over that. And, Grunkemeyer looked decent too. I mean, didn't blow anyone out of the water, but it was fine. I think that's going to be an interesting battle to watch, and not just for this season, but especially, for 2026 when Drew Hour's no longer there. I mean, it's going to come down to probably those two battling for the starting spot next season. So that'll be an interesting one to watch. I liked what I saw. And again, you say it is a spring game, caveat's a spring game, but I liked what I saw. Devontae Ross, guy's got legit speed. He's got the ability to get the deep balls. And I'd say Kyron Hudson also showed a good, reliable set of hands. So the transfer receivers looking pretty good. Then I say Lyric Samuel had I think he had a pretty spectacular catch. And then Kaiser Denmark, he had a nice catch in traffic too, from what I recall. So again, no spring game, so don't put too much into it, but it was nice to see, receivers show up.
You mentioned wide receiver during that, how some of the guys stuck out to names that you mentioned, Kyron Hudson and Devontae Ross. We did mention these guys a couple different times as we, were discussing Penn State during the season, going into the playoffs. I mentioned that they landed Kyron Hudson from USC, had landed Devontae Ross from Troy. This was the part of a total makeover at wide receiver. Trey Wallace is out. He's at Ole Miss now. We have Amari Evans is also out. He is at Washington. Mm-hmm. So Penn State brought in Kyron Hudson and Devontae Ross, once again, both from USC and Troy. But Penn State also just recently, actually on the spring day game itself, lands Syracuse Trebor Pena, who, was a big productive wide receiver for the Orange last year. Now, granted, more of a pass-happy offense. They threw the ball a lot, but Pena had, over 80 receptions. I want to say like 900 yards, 9 touchdowns. So an extremely productive player for Penn State, where now you have this 3 wide receiver trio of Hudson, Ross, Pena. Looks a lot better than I think I don't want to say than Penn State could have hoped for, because I don't know if you have that de facto bona fide number 1 wide receiver, but I think that you feel a lot better about wide receiver today than Penn State probably did, when the offseason began. So just, Tim, overall thoughts on where wide receiver is at, and is it a strength? Is it still a weakness? Is it still a question mark? Kind of where you're at with how you're feeling about Penn State's wide receivers. I don't want to say pass catchers, because I think we all feel good about tight end, but what do you feel about the wide receiver group now that Penn State has brought these 3 guys in?
Well, I certainly think the floor has been raised significantly. What the ceiling is remains to be seen. But I'll say I guess it's a little soon to say whether it's a strength. I think we're going to find that out once the games actually begin in the fall. But I feel confident saying at least it's not going to be a major weakness like it's been the last couple seasons. You got 3 guys, a couple in Ross and Pena, who were their previous team's number 1 receiver, and then Hudson, I believe, who was like USC's number 2 guy, I want to say, or number 2 or number 3 guy. But they all bring reliable set of hands. Ross is more Ross is probably the deep threat of the three. If you go and look at highlight reels, you see him like burning Iowa's secondary a couple times last year with Troy. And I think he's also in the mix to be Penn State's punt returner. So that should tell you something about his, what the staff thinks of him and how they can utilize him. I mean, there is going to be a number one. He seems like the candidate to be the number one receiver, but again, time will tell on that. And then Hudson, of course, Rob will set of hands. I think I already said this from the spring game. Trebor Pena is an intriguing prospect, as you mentioned. 941 yards receiving on 84 catches, 9 touchdowns. He was a leader of the receiving room at Syracuse last year, and albeit pass happy, this offense won't be as pass happy as the one he just came from, but it's clear to me they see a role for him as well in the offense. And it seems like to me, the starting trio of receivers are all going to be 1-year rental guys, which should tell you something, though, about how Penn State feels about the rest of its offense and what they just needed, just to take that extra half step towards being a legit national championship contender offensively. So if these guys can just be, reliable, especially reliable against the bigger opponents, because common theme in some of our biggest games last year, it was just the receivers seemed to just do a disappearing act when it mattered most. So you want to see those guys be able to step up. Because one thing, I'm sure they will, we'll watch Ross or Pena or Hudson just torch Nevada or FIU or Villanova. But, can they do that to Oregon? Can they do that to Ohio State? If they can, I'm not saying that to torch them, but can they at least be productive against those teams? I think then we'll really know how much of a strength this group really is.
I think they're floor raisers, kind of like you said. I think when you started, you said, I don't know what the ceiling is, but the floor feels like that it has been raised. I think that if you compare all of them to like Trey Wallace, for example, I think Trey Wallace still has the higher ceiling of the three, if I had to guess. And I think just generally overall, I still would take it, Ray, if it was a draft between, if you put Trey Wallace, Amari Evans, and then these three, who would I pick first? I think I still would take Trey Wallace, but it's not, dramatic. It's not dramatically, it's not crazy to think that, Hudson would be a better wide receiver, that maybe even Pena would be. Just because I think Hudson in particular does have such a high floor of I know this guy will at the very least, it's tough to know how many games Penn State's going to play, right? If they play 14 games, it feels like Hudson's going to have, between 45 and 55 catches. I feel pretty good about that. Whenever we do our over-unders for receptions on Hudson, if we set it at 45, I feel pretty good that it's going to be higher than that. Now, is he going to be kind of like we've said, is he going to be a Jahan Dotson? Is he even going to be like a Parker Washington? I don't know, but can he be Mitchell Tinsley, a guy that, can get 4 receptions a game and get you a touchdown and make some big plays? I think Penn State has to feel pretty good about that. So curious to see what these guys do. I mean, Ross coming from Troy, that's a big step up. Fortunately, as you said, Penn State has, how do we want to put this nicely, a preseason out of conference schedule with Nevada, FIU, and Villanova. So it gives Ross a little bit of time to kind of mesh into things, and obviously he had this spring as well. Pena's an interesting one. Pena's the one that I think kind of is I don't want to say the one that can make it a strength, but I'm more confident in what Hudson can be as the Mitchell Tinsley possession guy. Confident in Ross being I don't say the up and down big play threat, but kind of as, the outside receiver that's going to be stretching the field more. He's not going to necessarily be someone that, gets a ton of targets or is going to be used in the offense in a big way, at least directly. Pena as a slot guy, and what he did so well at Syracuse is he's not the biggest guy, right? Only 6 foot, 185 pounds. He's not the fastest guy. He's not going to probably run a sub 4.5, but does a really good job of getting open, runs really good routes, good footwork. Just a guy that kind of understands the body control aspect of playing receiver and getting, defenders kind of on the wrong side of their feet and getting open that way. So we'll see if he can do that at Penn State, because if he does, it feels like, the type of receiver that Drew Allure can really, mesh with, just given, what Drew did with Tyler Warren is like kind of an underneath threat, a safety valve. I think that Pena can do a lot of those things as well. Tim, just with, and granted, we don't fully know what the Big Ten wide receiver core looks like now. It's only May 4th, so it's not like we've done our deep dives into who does Wisconsin have a receiver, who does Nebraska have a wide receiver, who does Oregon have a wide receiver. But where would you, just kind of knowing what you know about college football, where would you rank these Penn State receivers in accordance to the Big Ten? Because I would say they're probably top. I think they're top half of the Big Ten at the least, which I don't know is something that we could say about last year's wide receiver group.
It's interesting you say that, because I just like doing a little Googling to look at like how other people were ranking Big Ten receiving rooms, because I really don't have any clue what the other teams are doing besides Ohio State. I mean, they're a clear-cut number one. As long as Jeremiah Smith is there, they should be the number one receiving room. And plus, they're pretty much wide receiver U at this point. So that's your clear-cut number one. But after that, I mean, I don't know who you'd put in the second. I mean, Penn State could even make a case maybe with these 3 transfers. But I was looking up, I forget which site it was. Up top of my head,
I think
each report, but they have
Evan Stewart coming back. Even Washington, Denzel Boston, he's a guy that's probably going to be a first round pick.
Right, but I was saying, Pat, is this site, this website I was looking at, I forget if it was Sports Illustrated, Bleacher Report, but they were ranking Big Ten receiver rooms after the spring. They had Ohio State number 1, no surprise, but they had Penn State number 2 actually, and then Oregon was 3rd, and I forget. I think Washington was in the top 5, if I recall correctly. They had Michigan kind of low, actually, believe it or not. Apparently, they didn't get any major pickups from the portal or something. So,
no, they struggled last year wide receiver too as well. That was obviously with their quarterback play, it wasn't going to be that strong, but they were very Penn State like in their wide receiver core. And yeah, not surprised that just given what they still have at quarterback. I know they got Fresno State's quarterback, and they obviously have Bryce Underwood coming in, but it still can be a tough sell when that's kind of.
But Pat, I guess where would it rank them? I guess I would put it, like I said, at least top half. I think maybe you could put them top 5, just based on a lot of the other teams. They don't seem to have like some real. I mean, you mentioned guys like Denzel Boston, of course, and I mean Ohio State's just loaded, but
USC should still be up there too. I know we forget USC as a Big Ten.
USC, yeah, I think USC would be in the top 5. I think you could stick Penn State like somewhere in the top 5.
Which even so, like that is
it's crazy to say, but I mean, I think it speaks to like how good of a job the staff did. Identifying what they needed out of the portal to shore up the receiver spot.
Yeah. I think that once again, ideally, maybe you have someone that has like a little bit more size, someone that's more of a, like I said, like a total number 1. I know one of the guys that really won at Virginia is Malachi Fields. Marquise Haggins recruited him to Virginia, coached him at Virginia. He unfortunately went to Notre Dame, but someone like him, I think, could have really, put the wide receiver group in another class. But it certainly seems like it's an improved unit. It's better than it was last year. Granted, they had lost, Keandre Lambert-Smith in the spring, which, for as much as a headache as he could have been, was certainly a helpful receiver and would have helped last year. But no, I think that it is in a good spot. And for what Penn State has everywhere else on offense, and that's kind of like the main point of this, that, you feel really good about Drew. Offensive line is still a strength. You have 2 of the conservatively top 10 running backs in college football, in Nick Singleton and Kate Allen. And you have what you have at tight end, knowing that, of course, you're replacing Tyler Warren, which is going to be tough, but it's still one of the top 10 end runs in the country. And you don't necessarily need a first round type talent at wide receiver. You just need some competency. So it seems like, saying this in May, but it seems like Penn State did a good enough job where you feel pretty good about what they have at wide receiver. Looking at some other spots as far as Penn State goes, who they lost this spring. Obviously, we just mentioned that they added in Trebor Pena, and they're looking at some linebackers, which we'll get to in a second. But one of the reasons why they're looking at linebackers is because they lost Tamir Robinson, he was kind of shaping up to be that quasi starter. Penn State's transitioning more to like a 4-2-5, which they ran a lot of last year, and that was more their base defense. But with Jim Knowles coming in, it's more locked in stone that it's going to be 2 linebacker sets more often than not. So Tamir Robinson is kind of in that linebacker 3, linebacker 4 area. He opts to go to USC, where he's probably starting right away. And Penn State also loses J.B. Nelson to Kansas State, so another guy that was similar to Robinson in the sense of not a starter, but probably would have seen quite a bit of playing time. I know Nelson was in a position battle with Cooper Cousins. It always seemed like Cousins was going to be the starter, but J.B. Nelson, completely, super talented kid, opts for Kansas State, where once again, just kind of a easier place for playing time. Let's talk about linebackers though, Tim. So Penn State loses, like I said, Tamir Robinson. They still return Tony Rojas, who had shoulder surgery and something that plagued them all last year. Of course, they get DeLuca back. DeLuca still has, I don't know if you know this, Tim, DeLuca still has 9 years of eligibility left after this season. So he could conceivably be at Penn State until, what would that take us to, 2034. So just a little fun fact that DeLuca will never run out of eligibility, but he's back this year. Penn State only lost Kobe King at linebacker, but they're looking at some portal additions, and 2 of the ones that pop out, 2 of the ones that they hosted Rutgers, Muhammad Toure, who is his brother's on the team, Babu Toure, a safety, and they're also going to be hosting, actually, he's supposed to come in today, which we're recording this on Sunday, May 4th. They're going to be hosting North Carolina's Amari Campbell as well. So 2 really productive guys. Torre has dealt with some injuries. He's torn his ACL, I believe, in the same knee twice, once in 2022 and once last summer as well. But really productive guy, had 2023 90 tackles, 10 tackles for loss. Big kid, 6'2", 235. And Campbell kind of, similar production. Not as many tackles, but had something like, 65 tackles, 11 tackles for loss, 6.5 sacks for North Carolina, and someone that has 2 years of eligibility left. So, Tim, just thoughts on what they're doing at linebacker, knowing that they're going to be playing more 2 linebacker sets, but still going after 2 really talented guys in the portal.
I think I remember from Franklin's press conference, off the top of my head, I remember him saying that while he liked the progress they were making at linebacker, the younger guys like Anthony Specca and
Kari Jackson.
Yeah, and of course, I shout out to LeVar Arrington II, who made his Nittany Lion debut on the field last weekend. He got his share of cheers as he walked towards the locker room at the end of the game. So I'm hoping he'll realize his full potential and become as beloved as his dad was. But I digress. But Franklin did mention.
Can I say something quickly on LeVar the second?
Sure.
Like Abdul Carter, should be a defensive end. I don't know why this first year is fine. All right, be linebacker, but
maybe they'll switch him next year. Who knows?
They better. If you look at when we did our Meet the Class series for Abdul Carter, and not to say I'm the only one who thought this, like a lot of people were really high on Abdul Carter when he was a prospect, but from the beginning, I was like, this guy's a defensive end. Like, why? He could be a really good linebacker, but let's just play him a defensive end. His best trait is getting after the quarterback and just being an athletic freak. And LeVar II, same way. It's like, hey, this guy is 6'3", 235 with basically like no training at the college level at all. Like, let's just move him to. But like you said, I digress. That's conversation for another time. Linebackers, you can get back to it.
Of course. Yeah, so Franklin, he's confident in his younger guys. He does realize he wants to have some more experienced depth there, which he lost when Tamir Robinson decided to transfer to USC. So, Muhammad Toure, as you mentioned, you talk about Dom DeLuca being an older guy. Toure is class of 2019 recruit himself, so.
Yes.
That makes him like 30, so he's
the one recruiting camp I went to, it must have been 2018. It was a Nike camp at the Jets facility in 2018. And he was there, and he was not a highly touted prospect. And I not to pat myself on the back, but I said in a write-up that I did for BSD that I liked him more than I liked, I don't know if you're going to remember this name. His name is Keith McGuire. He was a PA kid at the time. He was from Malvern Prep, which is down in this area. Ended up going to Clemson, and I was like, I don't know. I saw both of them live. Torrey looked better to me. Keith McGuire never did too much at Clemson and has since moved on in life. But yeah, at that recruiting camp, like Caden Wallace was there, who is now in the NFL. Brian Breezy was there. He's now in the NFL. So Taquan Roberson was also there as a quarterback. Kyle McCord as a quarterback. All these guys are off as professionals. But yeah, Mo Torre still kicking it, despite the fact that he's going into his 6th season in college. But anyway.
But I think a guy like Torre, he can, give you some experience depth there. And, assuming he's healthy, I think he could probably be one of the first guys off the bench in the rotation if Rojas or DeLuca needs a breather. And then, of course, Campbell, probably the crown jewel of the linebackers in the portal right now. Penn State would obviously love to have a guy like him who was UNC's leading tackler last year. Obviously I'm sure the competition for him is going to be pretty stiff, but of course to get him on campus for a visit, as you mentioned, which is happening today, apparently that's pretty big. So we'll see. I guess, maybe I feel confident they can at least land Mohamed Torre. Campbell, obviously, that's going to be stiffer competition. I'm sure the NIL bag he'll need is going to be much higher than what Torre would probably need. So we'll see.
I think the lack of a clear space to start is going to be something for both of them, right? Whether you're Torre or Campbell, you're in the portal for a reason, right? You and Torre coming from Rutgers, where he started. Campbell coming from North Carolina, where he started, where they transfer to, they ideally want to start. And at Penn State, that's not totally clear, just because if they are going to go more 2 linebacker, it's who is that second linebacker? DeLuca generally has played more on 3rd downs and stuff like that. So I guess we'll see. But Torre's interesting in the sense that this is his absolute last year in college. I mean, if it weren't for the ACLs, he's probably someone that would have gone drafted. I don't know if he's a first or second rounder necessarily, but definitely was playing at a high enough level and, had the size and the athleticism where he's definitely a draft pick. And just even looking at, they're trying to find what I can online. I personally think that Torre is the better player, but saying that it's Torre's healthy, he's a better player. That's I don't know, it's like saying if I had Nick Singleton's speed, I would be a Division I athlete. Torre's not healthy though. That is the issue. He has 2 torn ACLs, and how much do you want to bet on that? Knowing what Penn State has on their defense as well, Zariah Fisher, defensive end that has dealt with multiple season-ending injuries. Alonzo Ford coming off of this torn ACL, he's another guy that has had multiple season-ending injuries. So it's how much of that front 7 do you want to, play that risk-reward game of, if they're healthy, they're going to be really good. So I don't know. I mean, I think Penn State would obviously be happy with either. Penn State, for the most part, especially in the spring, I don't think that they would be hosting guys on visits necessarily that they weren't pretty secure on. And both of these guys, Torre, Penn State obviously has a relationship with the family, being that they have, his younger brother Babu here. And then even with Campbell, I know that he's apparently close with Tony Rojas. Tony Rojas was, pretty vocal on Twitter about getting Campbell in for a visit. And then when he, announced that he was visiting, Rojas was celebrating. So it seems like Penn State at least has, the information that they need on both of those guys to bring them in for visits that they're pretty comfortable with, bringing them on if they want to, and if things align NIL wise and playing time wise. So yeah, linebacker is just a funny spot because ideally it's Rojas, it's DeLuca. I know that neither of those guys are for different reasons. Rojas, struggled at times last year, but is a highly touted prospect, really, really athletic. DeLuca on the other end, not as highly touted as a prospect, right? Was a walk-on, but still a bit limited. So you would like to at least land one of these guys. So we'll see if that happens. I know that we'll save all this for a different podcast when we talk about each position, but defensively at least, what is your main concern? Assuming that Penn State, let's say that Penn State doesn't land Campbell or Torre, kind of where is your biggest concern? Is it safety? Is it linebacker? Is it defensive end? Is it defensive tackle? Where do you look at? And if you had to pick one position, would you say, I don't really like it there? Because I don't think linebacker would necessarily, I don't love the depth, but I don't think it's in as bad a spot as, not that any of them is in a bad spot, but safety and defensive tackle to me kind of stick out more. It's like, I would like a guy there, but doesn't seem to be in the cards with who's in the portal.
I was going to say I'd say defensive tackles maybe the biggest concern. Obviously, you got Zane Durant is one of your starting who could be a game wrecker there, along with Dennis Sutton off the edge. But you have to, like you mentioned, Alonzo Ford. Probably could be the other starter at D tackle, but his injury history. Can he stay healthy? Can he be what he was pre-injury? Then behind that, it's a bunch of younger guys who, while talented, just not proven. Xavier Gilliam, Ty Blanding, Liam Andrews, Caleb Artis. So I guess D tackle would be my biggest concern. Safety, you can make a case for that as well. I mean, Zakee Wheatley obviously has one of the safety spots locked down. And then, of course, you do have King Mack back on the team at least, so maybe he can win that other spot, or Dejon Lane, who did an impressive job as true freshman year last year, filling in when KJ Winston got hurt early in the season. He's mentioned maybe Vibwe Torre, Antoine Belgrave Shorter. Those are other guys to keep an eye on. So there's some, but yeah, as depth wise, you like to see a little more, I guess. It's in terms of proven talent, but there's, I thought to say they're going to be like major weak spots, but there's just areas of concern, I guess you could say.
Yeah, and no, that's kind of, I mean, the beauty of where Penn State's at, almost across the board, even offensively, is that none of these spots, especially with what they've done at wide receiver, none of these spots are like what I would say bottom half of the Big Ten. But defensive tackle, for me, it's just comparatively to other years. And I think Penn State was just super, super fortunate that they just had like the right, I don't like the right guys at defensive tackle when all of this happened with getting these guys like the extra year eligibility with COVID and stuff like that. Like the fact that Penn State last year was going into the season with Zane Durant, Devon Ellis, Hakeem Beamon, Izzard, and Alonzo Ford as their top 5 defensive tackles. Like it's just really good. Like Keziah Izzard didn't get drafted, but got a really, really good payday from the Chiefs as an undrafted free agent. They gave him like a lot of money. I think he's a guy who could stick around the NFL. Hakeem Beamon, I know his career did not end in the way that probably anyone wanted it to, with him, basically just quitting the team as in the middle of the season. But like a guy who played a lot of football for Penn State and was a good player when he was out there. Devon Ellis just another guy that I think will stick around the NFL. Like just the fact that last year they could go, 5 deep, and they were going 5 deep with guys that were like grown ass men, like 23, 24-year-olds. Like in college football, that matters when you're going against, a 19-year-old or a 20-year-old, and you're, Devon Ellis, in your 6th season. Like it's just a little bit different this year comparatively, where they're really putting a lot on Zane Durant staying healthy, and there's no reason to think that he won't stay healthy. But Zane Durant, Alonzo Ford, Xavier Gilliam, I don't know. I guess we'll see. I mean, Penn State was in the spot back in 2016-ish area with needing to depend on guys like Curtis Cawthorn, who just jumped out of nowhere, Parker Cawthorn, who kind of jumped out of nowhere, and young guys like Kevin Givens and Robert Windsor, who stepped up as redshirt freshmen. So perhaps we'll see the same this year. But I would certainly feel better about the defensive tackle. They could land one in the portal, but that doesn't seem like it's going to happen. And it just seems like linebacker is kind of where it's at. So anyway, kind of just to wrap everything up, as we're saying, Penn State, like positionally, like none of these spots are in an actual like bad place. Like we're very fortunate that our discussions are, defensive tackle isn't that great. We only have one all Big Ten guy in Zane Durant, and we don't have 2. Like that's a pretty good spot to be in. And the national media apparently agrees, because almost anywhere you look, if you look at Sporting News, if you look at Sports Illustrated, if you look at the On3 guys, if you look at 24/7, ESPN, no matter where you go to find your way too early top 25, Penn State is almost consistently in the top 5 and getting some love. I've seen them as high as, I think, Adam Brenneman, which, okay, a little bit of bias, but I think Adam Brenneman has them number 2 behind Ohio State. So
I think On 3 or I want is either On 3 or some publication had him number 1.
So Ari Wasserman, I don't think his came out yet for On 3, but he's been teasing that he's going to put Penn State number 1. Him and Andy Staples have a show. Andy Staples has Penn State number 4, but they're going to release Wasserman's a little bit later on, perhaps maybe this week. But he's been teasing that he's going to have Penn State number 1, or at least thinks that they have a legitimate shot at being number 1. So, Tim, when is the last time that you felt this good about Penn State going into a season? Because I know, like, for myself, like, even comparatively to last year, it was probably the least excited I've been about a Penn State season in a long time. And that doesn't necessarily, that's not like a shot at Penn State. I guess kind of just college football in general. I wasn't that excited about the college football season. And even Penn State, I was just so in on their 2023 season because I had very similar thoughts to what I have now. I thought that was kind of, one of the years. But when's the last time you felt this good about Penn State? Because for me, I think it's 2017 going into that season, knowing that you're going off the Rose Bowl, going off the Big Ten Championship, getting Trace and Saquon and all those guys back. And then 2023, where you have, the Singletons and Drew Aller and Katron Allen and Chop Robinson. And oddly enough, we still have a lot of those guys here this coming season. But is there anything, especially during the James Franklin era, and I know that you can go on, just with your Penn State fandom into the 90s as well, but is there any time that you felt this good about Penn State going into a season?
I mean, I'll say this. First of all, this is the best I've felt about Penn State going into a season under James Franklin. And I think a big part of that has to do with the fact that the team finally got over the hump, got into the playoffs last year, and also made a deep run and, was one painful interception away from perhaps playing for a national championship. So I really think that getting that monkey off their back really helped. I think it was more like an 800-pound gorilla, I suppose, than a monkey, but like it was, real. But that was big. And I think that, but also having both Singleton and Allen come back, which, mind you, I thought at best maybe Singleton would come back, and I thought Katron Allen for sure was going to either declare pro or maybe hop in the portal and be the main guy at some other school.
Ohio State.
But I definitely did not see both of these guys coming back, so that was big in my book. And then, of course, O-line, you returned all but one starter, and tight end. Of course, I think you can always feel good enough about the tight end room. Obviously, there's no Tyler Warren there, but I think from what we saw, Luke Reynolds and, Khalil Dinkins, very reliable, especially in the red zone.
Khalil Dinkins, like, I'm not for sure.
I think he's one of the more underrated players in the team, Pat.
I'm not saying that he's going to have like a Tyler Warren breakout season. I like Angel Rapplier is like one of my guys. He's coming off a season.
I hope Rapplier puts it together. I know he had injury issues. Hopefully he's healthy and he can show what he's made of too. I mean, I feel good about tight end in general.
Yeah, I just mean with all like the, Rapplier was a highly touted prospect. Luke Reynolds was a highly touted prospect. Of course, Penn State landed, another 5-star-ish player, Andrew Olesh, right? But I feel like even national media wise, like they all just say Luke Reynolds, completely get. I feel like Khalil Dinkins, like if you had to give me, odds on what Penn State tight end leads them in receptions, I weirdly think it might be Khalil Dinkins, or maybe not weirdly. Like, I just think he's a super, super talented potential NFL player, and just similarly to Tyler Warren, right? Was just behind some really good guys, Brenton Strange, Theo Johnson, and then once he is able to, make his mark, he's going to in a big way. So we'll see. I don't want to give too much. We'll talk about tight ends in depth.
But but the point I'm making is, I have all these key offense, but also on, defensive side too. I mean, Dennis Sutton coming back, and St. Durant,
AJ Harris at corner,
Zakee Wheatley. I mean, guys who all could have declared pro, all these guys coming back. And then you go grab these 3 portal receivers who were all very productive at their former programs. to me, it just sounds like this is a staff and program that feels like this is their year. This is the year to go all in, to push all your chips to the center of the table and, gun for that national championship. Obviously not saying they're going to win the Natty. We'll do our roundtable predictions in August for that. But this is definitely a team that believes this is their time. And that's, to me, that's pretty exciting to see. And similarly, yes, I did feel pretty excited for 2017 and for 2023. But I think I want to compare this year to maybe, as far as like legit national championship hype, this is like 1999 to me, because that team, that was a team of LeVar Arrington and Courtney Brown were leading the defense at the time, and both of them ended up as the top 2 picks in the 2000 NFL draft. I remember Sports Illustrated had them number 1. I think they started out number 2 in both the AP and coaches poll, just behind Florida State. And, there's a ton of hype on that team for the defense alone. Offense was, you had some guys, but it obviously wasn't nothing like what the offense is now. So I feel like you take this offense, put that with that 99 defense, and maybe they do win the Natty. But hopefully this, unlike the 99 team, the 2025 team will live up to its billing and hopefully get a legit crack at the Natty.
Yeah, I mean, different time frame of how we crown a national champion too, where Penn State can at least slip up once. I think that's, and once again, we'll go in depth on the schedule later. On the road to Ohio State, and not to say every other is manageable, because I think going to Iowa is never easy. Indiana could still be a really good team, and Penn State would host them. But
that Michigan State game in mid-November on the road, I mean, Michigan State feels like a bit of a wild card to me, as far as
I was actually thinking the same of Rutgers. Rutgers actually did quite well in the portal. I know they're losing Mohamed Toure, but they landed some good really good defensive end in the portal. Bradley Weaver from Ohio. We'll say this for another time. I just want to say that Penn State needs to be one of Oregon or Ohio State. That is like
absolutely
the only, that's the only difference between last year and this year, of like Penn State, even going into last year, was going to be favored in every game except for Ohio State. This year, I mean, we'll see with that Oregon game. Oregon does have a lot of turnover. That just had,
I would say, just right now, I mean, I would guess they're going to be a slight favorite at home against Oregon.
Yeah, I think so too. We'll see though. I mean, Oregon is,
and also, Pat, I don't know if you read on like the On3 Penn State, but apparently some I guess people that are sleuthing out, TV times. So I guess the way that the networks do their draft, I guess they do draft picks for, which weeks they'll tell. So Fox gets the top 3 picks, and supposedly, obviously, Michigan, Ohio State weeks always are top pick, but then you have Texas and Ohio State in week 1, which I'm sure, no doubt, that's big noon. And then Penn State and Ohio State, which again, that's probably a lock to be a
noon kick.
So that leaves NBC and CBS to take Penn State, Oregon with the 4th pick. So you're looking at a 3:30 or 7:30 kick in late September. I think that's going to be the whiteout game this year.
I do know that the Oregon Penn State game is now trending to not be a noon kick, because I have a wedding on that day at 5:00. So in perfect fashion, I was like, oh, it's not a big deal. It's probably gonna be a noon kick. I'll be able to watch it.
Scheduling a wedding on a fall Saturday. How could you?
Yeah, not
great. Yeah.
So yeah, no, I am aware that it is now looking like it's going to be 3:30 or a 7:00 kick or 7:30 kick, whatever NBC fully does. But yeah, I mean, good for Penn State, good for the atmosphere, bad for old Pat. But we're trying to figure that one out. I don't know if that's a battle I'm going to be able to win, but we'll see. But yeah, we'll talk way more about the schedule and stuff like that. We'll talk about Oregon and Ohio State and Michigan and whoever else is going to be in the Big Ten is going to be very good this year. on a later episode. Just wanted to kind of use this one to recap what's been happening for Penn State. Good offseason so far. I think that you can't really complain with what Penn State has lost versus what they brought in. Knock on wood, sounds like Penn State is relatively healthy as far as, I know a lot of guys were not a go for the spring, from Tony Rojas to Deny Dennis Sun to some other guys, or at least weren't ready to go for most of the spring. But it doesn't seem like anyone, no John Reed torn ACLs or Sean Lee, to really take it back, torn ACLs in the spring. So can't ask for much more. And that's all we got, Tim. Any final thoughts for the people?
Well, what it's May the 4th as we're recording this. And not a big Star Wars guy or anything, but I'm saying we got about a little less than 4 months before the Nevada game. So we'll be starting
17 weeks.
We're starting our countdown soon on BSD around Memorial Day weekend, 100 days to kick off. So we'll be doing a slightly different format this time. So I'm teasing us a little bit. So you'll want to check that out. But yeah, before got 3.5 months, we'll say, and then we'll get to see this team back in action before you know it. So
absolutely. All right. Make sure that you are reading the website at blackshoediaries.com. Make sure that you are, I need to do a better job of saying this during the full show, not waiting till, we're 50 some minutes or 40 minutes into it, but subscribe the video, subscribe to the channel, helps us out a ton. We are going to be back more consistently through this offseason. I know, like I said, I promised some different things, and life just unfortunately kind of got in the way, but we'll be back more consistent basis as we lead up to this Penn State season. As always, that's Tim. I am Patrick. Thank you for watching, and we will see you next time.